Hello everyone and welcome to this week's plugin tutorial. In this one, I'm going to be showing you the kind of workflow you need to export your plugins for release as well as for people to test or clients. This is a little bit different from the debugging version that we use, and I'm going to be going over the Windows and Mac side of things today. Before we get started, I do want to remind you down below, hit subscribe and the bell icon to be notified of new videos coming out twice weekly in the channel, and down in the description you can follow me on GitHub for coding updates and Instagram for other live updates. If you haven't already joined our Discord server, make sure you come and join to get help with scripting, extensions, plugins, submit tutorial ideas, hang out with some of our knowledgeable members, and much more. And if you'd like to help support us on YouTube, you can do so in the description by becoming a member, supporter, premium supporter, or VIP, which comes with cool perks like VIP streams, Discord status, badges, and much more. And also in the description are some useful links to things like Gumroad, AE Scripts, and Adobe Exchange, where I release some other cool stuff. Alright, so first let's take a look at the Windows side of things. How do we get our plugin ready for release or use by other people who are not developers? Well, as you may already know, there is a debug and release option up here when we build. And this is the sort of main place we're going to adjust things. If we right click on our, not our solution, but our project, and go to the properties, here we can change our properties to be for debug or release. And in this case, you want to double check that some properties are matching, and especially if you're including other libraries or things like that, you'll want to make sure that these settings are the same. By default, a lot of them should already be set up the same, and the way we can see if they're different is by clicking on all configurations. If they are the same, they'll just display a normal value like here. But if they're different, you can see it will say different options. So we have different options between our debug and our release version because our release version isn't set up to debug anything because that's pretty normal. So that's good for the debugging under configuration. The only other two sort of areas we need to look are C and C++ and the linker options. Here we have some include directories which differ. Our debug include directories, you can see here in this case I'm including this external thing called native file dialogs, which allows you to have a pop-up file dialog, but in my release version this is missing. So when I look at all configurations, they're different because I actually need to update my release version to also include this additional include directory. So this is just something you want to do. You want to go to all configurations, you want to go through the options and look at the ones that have different options set up. If they have different options but they should be the same, obviously change it. If you're not sure, we can keep looking. So in this case, we have treat warnings as errors. In the debug configuration, we have this set up to no. And in release, we have it set to yes. This actually shouldn't matter because a debug version needs to be a lot more safe. So you should be fine having this as yes. But if you do have problems building this because you have too many errors, it may be worth a shot setting that to no. We'll go back to all configurations and go down to optimization. You can see we have two different optimizations. We have it disabled for debug and set to O2 maximum optimization for release. This is actually fine. Preprocessor definitions, we have slightly different definitions here. It looks like one of them is just set to debug as well, which is fine. We don't need the debug definition for release. Under runtime library and struct member alignment, these are actually relatively important. Under debug, you should have a multi-threaded DLL or a MDD. This is specifically for debugging, and your struct member alignment should be set to default. You'll actually have issues building in debug mode if this isn't set to default most of the time. For release, you should have a multi-threaded DLL in most cases. The struct member alignment, again, we'll look at when we try and build this to see if this causes any issues, but a lot of the settings for release versions can be a little bit more defaulted compared to the debug. So that's actually good for all these, unless you have very specific settings you need to change in these others. And in linker, you may have some linkage to things in here, specifically dependencies under input. Here you can see again, I have a dependency for this native file dialog library, and this is where the actual library file is included. The previous thing we looked at was the actual location of all the header files and stuff. This is the dependency library file, which you can see I don't have in my release version, so I would need to put that in there in order for it to work. And that covers all the options. You want to just make sure that all those are checking out. It's mainly the includes and the libraries that you want to include. So you can see just a few errors here already. These all have to do with the things that I was just mentioning. The first one, uh, Windows ignore packing mismatch. Almost 100% of the time, this is caused because of, where is the option? Here we have our struct member alignment, set it to default. That error should now be gone. You can see it's gone now. Now we have all these identifier is undefined. Again, this is most likely because we're not including that required native file dialog inclusion that I had in here. So we have additional include directories here. I'm going to copy that and add it to my release version as a new folder here. See if that removes any. We had 7 errors. And now we have way less, but we have the following is treated as an error. We're taking 1.0 and dividing it by another float. This is what I meant by sometimes having the treat warnings as errors set to no is a good idea. So let's go into that option, which I believe is right here in general. Treat warnings as errors. We don't have to. If you want to be extremely strict with how you are building your plugin, then you can. But now we should be getting near to being able to build this. And here we're getting an unresolved external symbol. This is usually caused by lack of included libraries. So if I go to my input in my linker, let's go ahead and check out this here. You can see NFD. This is also the NFD lib, which is perfect. I should double check that this is a release friendly version of this, and I think it should be. So we're just going to include this library as well in our release dependencies, and we'll see if that resolves our errors. And perfect. We've now built our plugin file release ready, ready to send to other people and clients or whatever on Windows. Just to reiterate, you just want to make sure a lot of your settings are set the same, that you have included all the libraries and directories and whatnot that you did in your debug version, because a lot of times you just are setting up the debug version and aren't adjusting both configurations at once. Alright, now here we are on the Mac side of things, which is surprisingly quite a bit easier with Xcode. For the most part, there are only a few things we need to adjust, and from what I've experienced, a lot of time is that the debug and release versions kind of mean the same thing. So first, looking at our project itself, we can look at the project and the target. Generally, I'm assuming you've already set up all of your basic settings, like the name of your target, the bundle identifier, which usually starts with com and things like that. But the main things we want to adjust again are the things that we are including externally, as well as making sure we're building for the right platform on Mac. The difference between Mac and Windows basically is that with Mac, we actually have to choose now what architecture we build for. Up here, if you have the option to build it, I can build for my Mac or any Mac which says Apple Silicon or Intel. This is the ability now that we can build for M1 Macs that use Apple Silicon. And this is available only in newer versions of Xcode. So this is where it's really important to make sure that you are using the newest SDK and are using the newest versions of Adobe programs, because this is a newest feature to make sure that your plugins can be upgraded, not only for multi-frame rendering, but also for these newer Apple architectures. So in the olden days, a few years ago, really, maybe even a year ago, we would just build for my Mac and pretty much everything would work nicely. Of course, you want to go into all your settings. The one thing about Xcode is there are so many more settings you want to modify, but generally the stuff we want to look for are like our include directories. Like here we have our header search paths. I've included things here to solve a lot of issues before, and this is where you'll include your header files from libraries and things like that. And don't forget to check your settings for both your project and your target. Your project are sort of the overall settings for this particular plugin project, and the target is like the plugin file itself. So you can see there are header search paths both for my target and project. If I had an external library, I'd want to make sure those would use the same. And then in your general settings for your target on Mac, you want to make sure you have all the included frameworks. If you need any extras, especially if you're doing something like GPU, you will need to include other types of libraries and frameworks. And you can go through the build phases, the build settings and all that. Make sure you have all of your files in here and aren't missing anything. You aren't missing your H files or anything. And really, it's just going through the settings and making sure everything looks good. There's not any particular settings here that make or break stuff. As long as you have all the included libraries, directories, and things like that, everything should work smoothly on your Mac. And then we will go to build for any Mac so that we can have this compatible with all Mac computers, including the newest Apple Silicon. Now, in the past, we used to build by this like play and run button, but now we kind of do it more or less via product archive. This is something that I've seen recommended for M1 Macs specifically, because it seems when you use the previous method to build for the newer architecture that there are issues. So make sure you use product archive. And this reminds me of one other thing. This doesn't really apply for Windows, but more so on Mac, you can set up your signing and capabilities. This lets you sign your plugin files using an Apple developer account or an Apple application account if you have one, and allows you to sign and have your plugin more trusted, get it signed and notarized by the servers, and have that trusted on any Mac computer no matter how strict their security is. And then you're ready to distribute your plugin to your clients, the public, or whoever is using it. You'll have your Mac and your Windows version, which should be one-to-one with the debug version that you've been testing with for quite some time. And of course, you can use the release version yourself to test and make sure it works as well. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, hit the thumbs up button. Down below, hit subscribe and the bell icon to be notified of new videos coming out twice weekly in the channel. And down in the description, you can follow us on GitHub for coding updates, as well as Instagram for other live updates. If you're not already a member of our Discord server, make sure you come and join to get help with scripting, extensions, plugins, submit tutorial ideas, and much more. And if you'd like to help support us on YouTube and get cool perks, you can become a member, supporter, premium supporter, or VIP, and help us out financially on YouTube specifically. And you can also check out the links to AEscripts, Gumroad, and Adobe Exchange down below to support me in other ways. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.